Hi, my name is Ali Ariano, and I will be presenting Chapter 3, Foundations of Individual Behavior from our textbook, Organizational Behavior and Managing People and Organizations. I chose this chapter since I had the opportunity to choose from chapters 1 through 6. I thought that this would be just a good leap pad into the rest of our semester as we study organizational behavior in organizations. So let's start off the bat with what we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about the people, personality, attitudes, perceptions in organizations, and then last but not least, types of workplace behavior. And of course, I have a PowerPoint slide for you to follow along as you view this video. So if you want to pause and go back to that, I've put it together with the link from my video. Feel free to do that now. If you already have that PowerPoint up, we'll go ahead and dive right into the information from this chapter. I thoroughly enjoyed reading through this chapter, and I thought that it started off really well. First, it started off with the title of What to Do When the Boss Releases His Inner Toddler. And then from there, there was a scenario that the chapter wanted to put yourself in. If you've not read this scenario yet, again, I would say pause this video, go ahead and read that. It's on page 60 and 61. And then once you've done reading that, go ahead and come back to this presentation. If in the case that you have already read it, I'll go ahead and summarize what it was saying. But so it's putting yourself in a room with 9 other vice presidents of a small chain of a regional clothing store where you're in charge of the women's apparel department. And in each month, you have a review and business recap that you give to your big boss. And during that time in this scenario, the boss is easily angered and also very short-fused. He actually ends up throwing a chair at you right after you've given your numbers that were not so impressive to him. And it leads straight into management and people's behavior and organization, whether you're on the management level or whether you are just a team member. Then from there, it goes straight into what to do during that time that behavior is happening. I'm sure we've all had situations where we've had people in our organization have a big blow up. I'm sure there were times even when we wanted to express a strong emotion, and whether we did or not, that emotion is very real, and there are times that you just have to step away and breathe. And so, as we all know, these situations are very popular in the workplace, and so this chapter will lay a foundation of what does that mean? What does individual behaviors mean for us, and how can we understand it in order to lead people and manage our organizations better by our knowledge of people's behavior? So first, we're going to talk about people in organizations. The very first highlight I want to hit are psychological contracts. And so this is where a person's expectations regarding what she or he can contribute to the company, and then what the company will give in return. I think this is very important because we've all been on job interviews. I've been on so many since graduating from undergrad just this past year. And that's what it is. It's finding what I can give and what the organization can give to me, whether that be a career path or incentives or benefits. So that's the first thing that is hit there. And then next is the person job fit. And so this is where the contributions that are made by the individual match what the organization is giving in return or rewards. And then, of course, last but not least, people and organizations are all unique, and they're all different, and they're all multifaceted. And so realizing that people are so different, I think it's important, and the book highlights this too, that managers need to establish an effective psychological contract with their employees. Next, which is on the next slide, we're going to talk about personality and organizations. All of you have heard of the big 5 personality traits. So being able to agree with everyone is the first one. Just getting along with everyone. And during this time, I know a lot of these will probably sound familiar to you, but perhaps you can do some introspective thinking while I go through these. The next is just being able to number goals on which a person focuses on. So how much are they conscientious of what's going on and what needs to get done? The next one is a person's tendency to experience unpleasant emotions such as anger and anxiety, depression, or overwhelming amount of vulnerability. The next that we've all heard is extroversion. It's the quality of being comfortable with relationships. And then obviously the opposite of that is going to be introversion. Then openness is obviously the capacity to be able to entertain new ideas and change results because of new information, change yourself because of new information. And so the more open you are, the more curious and creative you are. So a lot of researchers and managers are looking to this big 5 framework as they have in the past several years. It really does encompass an integrated set of traits for certain behaviors in certain situations, and we can really assess our employees just how they behave. And so that's why a lot of people go to that big 5 traits. The next, I'm sure all of us have heard if we've taken any sort of interpersonal communication class. I know how many of these I've taken, just out of curiosity if it's changed or anything, but the Myers-Briggs framework. So it's based off the classical work of Carl Jung. And so it's just assessing your personality traits, and it's this test. You can find this online. I encourage you to take a test if you've haven't done that yet. Next are, emotional intelligence. So how much people are self-aware. These are all things that personality and organization can really play into how coherent your organization is going to be. Next, we're going to look at attitudes in organizations. This is where we look at how do people get to the attitude they get into. We've all been at that place where we've gotten to a job and we were super excited, and 3 months later, that excitement faded. So how are those attitudes formed? Attitudes are generally formed through a sequence of cognition, affect, and behavioral intention. So in other words, we come to see how something that we believe to be true, so that's cognition, and then this knowledge then triggers that feeling, which is the affect, and then the cognition and affect together influence how we intend to behave in the future. And so something from the past, we see a certain thing a certain way, and then obviously that triggers a certain feeling. So if we see a boss that says that he's super open, or she is always transparent, and that's not the case, she's always in her office, or she is never seeing other managers in emails, that then triggers this thought of, perhaps she's not transparent, perhaps she's not open. And so from there, you stop going to your manager, you stop going to your CEO with problems because of the cognition and affect working together. So how our attitudes changed, we can get to an attitude quickly, and then changing attitude seems to be one of the biggest problems we have in organizations. And with that change, it's going to take the object of the attitude becomes less important or less relevant to the person. And so let's take, for instance, an employee has a negative feeling about his company's wellness program. Well, his spouse gets a wellness program through their organization and has all the benefits of that. His attitude towards his might become more simple, because he no longer has to worry about having a wellness program himself, because he can just piggyback on the wellness program with his wife. So just being able to shift that. And obviously there are some people who are going to resist change unless they get what they want. And You just have to be patient with them. And we know that a lot of patience goes in with attitudes and also behaviors. Now, perceptions in organizations. Perception is the set of processes which an individual becomes aware and interprets information about the environment. This is another really important element to workplace behavior. If everyone obviously perceives something the same way, things would be a lot simpler. That's obviously the opposite of what really happens. People perceive the things in very different ways. And then assumptions happen, and then reality from those assumptions happen, and then from there perceive different things. And so our chapter goes into basic perceptual processes, stereotyping, perception, and attribution. Of course, stereotyping is basing something off of one characteristic and making judgments and assumptions off of that. Last but not least, I wanted just to touch on types of workplace behavior. And so we see a lot of performance behavior. That's a total of set of work-related behaviors that the organization expects the individual to display. And so they're more diverse and a little bit more difficult to assess. However, it does have to do with assessing the job performance. We've heard of dysfunctional behavior. That's what's detracting from the organizational behavior. So not showing up for work, always calling in. Those are things that are going to take away from the organization. And then last but not least, we see organizational citizenship, a person's degree, the extent to which his behavior makes a positive overall contribution to the organization. I know we kind of sped through all of that information, but I hope you're able to get kind of the key highlights to that, and that kind of went along with your reading and also the PowerPoint. But I wanted just to leave you with a quick question to ponder on as we've talked through what goes into individual behavior in an organization. But putting yourself in that role, and as many of you are already as a manager, how would you go about trying to make someone in your organization a better organizational citizen? Thank you for taking this time to listen. I appreciate it.